The following panel discussion was recorded at the Huntington Beach Art Center on September 24th, 2022, and features guest curators Chris Bartolucci, Ed Templeton, and Drake Woodson as they discuss their history with photography and their experience during the Emerge exhibition, currently on display at the Huntington Beach Art Center until October 22nd, 2022.
Thank you all for coming. First of all, how many our artists here are in the show? Thank you for being here. We have three fantastic panelists to talk to you for a little bit tonight. These are our curators who put the show together. So first we have Ed Templeton, who is street art and skateboarder extraordinaire, and he is off to do another fantastic show. What is it, Netherlands?
Yes, it's going to be in Maastricht, in Netherlands, in 2023.
And you have another book coming out?
There's a book coming out at the same time, yes.
Yeah, very exciting. And then over on the other side, we have Drake Woodson, who is the owner of Relics in Long Beach, right up the street. If you need any film photography supplies, or if you need film stuff developed, he's your go-to.
Thank you. Thank you.
What was it like for you to do this for the first time?
It was great. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it myself. I think just seeing the different types of work and photography, I think that was what I enjoyed the most. And just kind of, I know it takes a lot of courage too, see people putting work to actually have it judged. So I think just kind of being a part of that selection process with everyone here, I think that was outstanding, a lot of fun.
Great. And then right in the middle, we have Chris Bartolucci from LA, who is the co-host of the Analog Talk podcast. If you haven't checked it out, how many episodes are you up to now?
Timothy would know this by heart. I don't, unfortunately. We're over 100 for sure. Yeah.
5 years?
5 years going, yeah.
Yay.
5 years.
Very exciting. So
both these gentlemen have been on the show as well. So.
Yes. So if you haven't checked it out before, you have a lot to binge. You can catch up and all things analog. All right. So I know we have a couple of questions, but if you guys want to do a more in-depth introduction, we'll start with Ed. Go over yourself.
Okay. They gave us some questions to answer that could be interesting. And I would encourage anyone to blurt out a question if you have it too, because that always, I think, helps these kind of conversations along. If you guys could have your questions answered and it's not just us talking to you, it's better to be more of a discussion, I think. But okay, so should I answer this first question? How did I get into photography? For me personally, starting in 1985, I started skateboarding, and by 1990, I had turned professional for skateboarding, which is not that exciting, coming from Southern California, where the skateboard industry is, and then I had been pro for 4 years before I picked up a camera in a serious way. I felt like I was getting to live this incredible lifestyle, traveling the world and getting paid to skateboard, essentially. But I was around people whose job it was to shoot photographs of me for skateboard magazines. So I was always interested in their cameras and their equipment and things like that. And around 94 is when I had that epiphany for myself that I was living this quote-unquote rock star life, surrounded by an amazing cast of characters, that it's sort of a criminal that I hadn't been documenting it. At the same time, I had started being exposed to photography books. A friend of mine lent me some of his photography books because he was going on a trip. One of them was Nan Goldin's The Ballad of Sexual Dependency. Another one was a book by Larry Clark called Tulsa. And both those books had a really big impact on me because both those books were people who shot their own scene. Nan Goldin was shooting her particular scene in New York City at the time. Larry Clark was shooting these people in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it just gave me an insight to, I have a scene that I'm in, and I should be shooting it and documenting it. And so from that point on, I started carrying a camera around and shooting photos and learning and making mistakes and going through all the ups and downs that you do when you start trying to do something. And so that's how I got into photography. That was my start. How about you guys?
I got into photography in high school, and it was funny because I was thinking about this on the ride home up, because if they ask this question, I ask it a lot, so I should have an answer for it, because it's, but I was thinking, somebody in my life actually said to me, you should be a photographer, because I was always like, there was high schoschool things. I would always have a camera, like a disposable at the time, but I also would put them in little photo books, and I never, you don't think of that to be something you could do. And I ended up going to school for it, and I remember when I found out there was a photography school that I could go learn about photography, I was like in heaven. And that was the first time I was ever around like-minded people. Like now we have things like this, like meetups, and the internet brings us all together, but the first day of photo school in 2003 was the first time I was surrounded by people who were like just as amped on something as I was. So yeah, I went to school for it. I've been shooting like in the field since then, and obviously I do a lot of stuff in the community, and yeah, but it all started, I was photographing my high school boyfriend's band at the time, and that's where, there only was film, so I was like shooting, developing in my parents' sink, and then going under the stairs. My dad helped me make a little makeshift darkroom by stuffing socks in all the light seals under the basement. I got a little enlarger, and yeah, that's how I got my humble start.
Nice. All right. Hello. For me, I got into photography through my dad. I basically would just kind of follow him around and kind of take his camera when we would go on trips and things like that. And then eventually he kind of got tired of me just stealing his camera, and he was just like, take it, and now it's yours. And then basically he would just give me film and stuff like that. I would bring it to school, field trips, and obviously it was film because that's all we had back then. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was just super awesome to be able to shoot film and get it processed and look at everything. And I didn't even take a high school photography class. But I always had a camera with me and stuff like that, just kind of playing around, shooting it. And I think the biggest thing for me was just being able to just take it around. I have so many old negatives from when I played Little League baseball and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just one of those things. I just kept it with me when I was younger. And I kind of look back at some of those photos recently, and it was interesting to kind of see what they came out as. Some were okay, a lot were disposable cameras and stuff like that. But yeah, just when I was young, my dad wasn't professional, but he had a camera around, and I was just curious and bored, so I was able to just take that and take a lot of photos. Yeah. Was
your dad had a camera just for family stuff, or was did he consider himself a photographer as well?
It was mainly just family stuff. He had a Minolta SLR, which I still have. I found it a couple of months ago. But yeah, just taking, just pictures and stuff around trips and holidays and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was just thinking as you were saying that, how my grandfather had Super 8 film and had a projector for family stuff.
Yeah,
and it's
awesome.
How that stuff is so fetishized and cool now,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just normal, of course.
Yeah.
It's just awesome.
Yeah.
Were there any images that surprised you for the show? I think.
Yeah, I think there's one.
Yeah, that we were, all three of us were fascinated by.
Which one?
It's the portrait with
the three hands. It's an interesting image all in itself, but we were trying to figure out is how they did it.
Yeah, was there another?
Our question in the jury room was, is this photo digitally manipulated? Because as three people who work in analog film, and kind of our statements for what we wanted to see for the show, we put out there that we prefer film, we prefer sort of, regular moments. And we had some stuff on the jury panel that was clearly digitally altered. or manipulated, and we were kind of like not interested in that stuff. But then this one really caught our eye because we couldn't tell if it was digitally manipulated or not. At first, we all loved it, and then we realized, wait, there's an extra hand in this photo. Does the person have 3 hands, or is that someone else's hand? Has it been manipulated?
Yeah.
But
feel free to come take a look at it if you want.
Yeah, it might help.
You know, I couldn't see digital manipulation in there. I couldn't. The shadows look authentic. You know, I don't see any cut marks or anything. So.
Yeah.
It's such a strong image, regardless.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it made it into the show, because we were like, if we're having this conversation about, I mean, we're stuck on it for a while.
Yeah,
it has to go into the show.
Yeah, we spoke about it for so long. Like, is it digitally? You know, it doesn't matter. We still think the image is arresting.
Right.
So we kind of ended up deciding it goes in regardless if it's digitally manipulated.
Yeah, and we still don't know.
Yeah, we still don't know. I was just asking them
I know
because
they were here, and
the artist was
I
here
didn't
at
have
the
the
opening.
courage to be like, so.
But we will find out soon.
Yeah.
Soon. We will, the big reveal.
Question, sure.
Was your plan to exclude digital manipulation?
Not necessarily, but I think in our statements when we called for entries to this exhibition, and I think the reason we were chosen was to kind of come up with a different view, and I think it's sort of the norm now, digital photography, and then people manipulating it, and so we were not as interested in that. But I wouldn't say we were like exclusively cutting that kind of stuff out. It was just more like our preference was one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think our overall style.
It wasn't
was more,
hardcore. I mean.
Yeah, we weren't like no.
And I think even with that is like a question, as people who shoot analog film, we get asked. It's like the age-old question, like digital or film. And I don't think any of us is anti-digital. We just prefer film.
Yeah.
And we can afford it, I guess. So we're going for it still.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because when it comes down to it, good photography is good photography, whether,
Exactly.
kind of like what I said on Friday, whether you're taking it on your iPhone or, a camera from the 1900s, if it's a good image, it brings people in, it doesn't matter. And we get caught up in like, what film stock, what camera, what lens, what brand, like what. But especially like seeing work printed and displayed, we forget because we scroll through Instagram all the time. It's just so easy to just like look through people's work. But taking the time to like, print it and have it hung up, I mean, the work speaks for itself, and it doesn't matter whatever way you got that image.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if it's compelling and it tells a great story, I feel like that's the point. It makes you think, if you get something out of it, I think that's a win.
And it also comes to like to the other side of that is like you can know all the settings, you can know all the technical stuff of the camera, but if you aren't good at composition, like the basics of photography, it doesn't matter. You can buy the most expensive camera, but if you can get a good image with like a pinhole camera or a disposable, if the image is interesting, that should be the most important thing always.
Yeah, I think that's something we all discussed
Absolutely.
immediately, was how none of us were super interested in gear. And there's a lot of different factions in the photo world, and a lot of people do think about and talk and love to talk about, and which is fine. People fetishize the gear aspect, what kind of camera, what kind of thing.
I'm guilty of that too, I will say.
What kind of print and stuff. But I think we all agreed early on that it was like not about that, it was about the image. And so like you said, it could be a disposable camera, it could be an iPhone shot. I think there are iPhone shots, and there's at least a few in the show that were shot with an iPhone.
Yeah.
It's like, what's that saying? Like, the best camera is the one you have with you?
Exactly. The best camera is what you have with you.
Yeah. All right.
What would your advice be for any new photographer getting into the medium? I think showing up is half the battle.
I
a
agree.
lot of times. When you were saying that you got to school and suddenly you were around like-minded people, how world-changing that was.
Oh, yeah.
Because everyone is there for the same reason. They're interested in this thing. I mean, that's the exact thing you guys are all doing now, participating in this talk. You're showing up. You're here. You know, you came and you're participating in the art world, even if it's just this small sliver in Huntington Beach, California, in the Community Art Center. You're part of it. Your face is here. You're meeting other people for the first time that are interested in art too. So you're all here for the same reason, to look at some art and think about it and get inspired or get stoked on something. And that's something I tell young people all the time, is just do it. Start doing it.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to school to become a photographer. I hate when people say, I wish I could become a photographer. I joke around and I pull out my fake sword and I knight them a photographer. I'm like, you are henceforth a photographer.
I love that.
Right now I can declare it for you. As long as you take a camera and start shooting, then you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's like doing it is half the battle.
Yeah.
And especially if you want to like advance, quote unquote, in the art world, of like participating in a show like this and being here to meet like-minded people is really the first step. The other part of it is that it's glacially moving. People want to know, how do you get an exhibition? How do you get a book? And because they see you had an exhibition or a book, but they don't realize the 10 or 20 years you put up to that point, put into it, you know? It's like, sure, I might have had an exhibition, but you weren't there 20 years ago when I said yes to every potential coffee shop exhibition.
Yep.
And I did I did those things, and that was it, starting showing up. So I don't know if you guys had something to add to that.
I think a lot of that is definitely true. You know, showing up and just shooting. Like I always tell people when they ask me that kind of thing, it's like, just go shoot and don't worry about it. And you know, try new things and pay attention to what the light looks like and what that does to your photo or the settings, and don't be afraid to ask questions. There's a lot of gatekeeping in the photo community. So if you get somebody who doesn't want to tell you, ask somebody else, because there is people out there who want to share that knowledge, and don't be intimidated. You're like, we all started somewhere. I was in the basement of my parents' house, like mixing chemicals. I had no idea what I was doing, and I got images. That's what it comes down to.
I built my first darkroom looking at the Henry Horenstein black and white photography book that you can get
Great
at the
book.
library. I think colleges still teach it for Photo 101.
Yep.
I think I was telling you guys this story. How I didn't even understand half the words, but I just built it by looking at a book. No school, no nothing, and just for that desire. And I made all the mistakes. Once you make the mistake, you don't want to make it again. So that's like the best learning experience right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to ask you guys if you guys collect books.
I've been like falling down your hashtag rabbit hole.
Yeah, quite the collection.
Well, there's
I
two
do. Short answer, yes.
factions. I think there's some people I've met who don't want to see other photography because they think they'll be more original if they don't see that stuff. I'm definitely on the side of, I want to see everything because I want to compare my work to these great people, especially the masters, your Henri Cartier-Bresson and your Gary Winogrand and those kind of people, because that's how I feel like I get better by when I make my work. I want to look at it and go, would it fit in this guy's book, or would it fit, or is it in the same level? Compare and contrast. For me, that's been a huge learning experience, is just looking up to that. I think people shoot an image and they fall in love with it, but they haven't really tested it in the real world. It's like a personal love.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. I was gonna bring that up as well. As I just think you should look at a lot of physical books, even if it's like a PDF online or anything, just to like sample, just to taste, just to see different types of photographers out there and kind of like figure out your style. Because I think in the beginning, it's just important to just shoot, but over time you kind of want to develop a style, figure out what you like to photograph, and just keep shooting. I think that's the biggest thing. But I think books really helped me too, just figuring out like discovering new photographers. Like one of my favorites is Daido Moriyama. I think he's an incredible photographer, and it's he just shoots so much and he's just so consistent and he's always out there just like putting in the reps, and you can see the photographs that he's able to get. I mean, they're just incredible. And it's
The artist he mentioned, Daido Maruyama, is a Japanese photographer who is known for high contrast images. So there's almost no grays in his images. It's like either black or white. So
Wow.
they almost look like they've been photocopied 1,000 times or something. So it's a very distinct style.
yeah.
And he's also known for shoot. I mean, he's got like 1,000 books out.
Well-
And it seems like he just shoots
Yeah,
like
all the
crazy.
time. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where, like, don't be afraid to get inspired either. Like, you can kind of put your head in the sand and be like, I don't want to look because I don't want to be a copycat or whatever. But, I mean, coming to a show like this or, like, getting a photo book, I mean, I get so much excitement from shooting and, you know, sharing my work as much as I do, like, devouring other people's work. I think it's just as important, and it lights my fire just the same. So.
You
Yeah.
you have to copy in some ways. I think we all, like, especially anyone who shoots photographs, actually, you see something as you're walking down the street and you go, that's a photograph. And you probably think that because you saw a famous, you saw someone like
Yeah.
Gary Winogrand already did that.
Yep.
And it's almost like photo bait because you know it, you've seen it,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you have to shoot it yourself, and you shoot it. And then, yeah, it might be derivative, but it also might be something cool. It might be different. So my policy's always been shoot first, ask questions later. You know, I don't worry in the moment, should I shoot this or not, or will this be cool or not cool, or will it be derivative
Yeah.
or not derivative. I'd rather shoot it and decide that later and have that moment captured. And then later I'll decide, oh, this is derivative, but I don't want to like hamper myself in the moment and not shoot something.
Yeah, I think when you're shooting too, I mean, just in that moment, press the shutter, you see it, sort it out later, because I know there were some photographs. There was the one with the American flag draped over in the backyard. And I know for a fact if I'm walking and I saw that same photograph, like, I'm going to shoot it.
Yeah.
Even though to some people it might be, oh, it's so cliche, or American flag,
Yeah.
okay. But for me, I know that I personally would have shot that photograph myself.
Yeah, we had a good discussion about that
Yeah.
one. It seemed like kind of plain, but then we all admitted we probably would have shot that too.
Absolutely.
And maybe we were being biased because we would shoot that, and like so I think that's why we ended up including it, because we realized like we all would have shot that as well. Question.
When you were picking for the show, would you say you tended to pick photographs that were more in line with your style or different to your own style?
I think for me, it was an intimidating process when we first got,
Yeah.
we wanted the show to be good. We'd never done it. I'd never done anything like this before. And, you look at people's work and you know that, like, every single person put their heart into it. So, you feel a certain way about it. It was a struggle in the beginning because we were like,
Yeah.
we love everybody. Everybody's doing great.
Yeah, we had a big discussion about just that, just like the idea of like judging.
Yeah.
It felt weird for us to just be sitting there judging all these works, like. But then ultimately we had to like take a certain number that we
Yeah.
got and make it fit into a show that we
Yeah.
wanted. And we
And-
wanted to have some breathing room. We didn't want to pack it, because we could have just said everything's cool and put it all
Yeah.
in, and then it would have been.
Yeah,
Then there would have been no direction
exactly.
to the
I-
show. We wanted to have some kind of direction to the show. So we
Yeah.
struggled with that, the idea of judging people and.
Yeah.
But I
all
guess we
this-
did, in some ways we did, I think we ended up choosing images that fell within our parameters that we laid out. We were each asked to make a statement
Yeah.
for what we were looking for this particular show.
And it's interesting because, like, each one of us likes what we like, but then for three of us to make a decision, everything that you see in this show, like, definitely rose to the top because of whatever reason or whatever, thing that spark that photo had. But
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, all three of us ended up liking every image in this show. These were
Yeah.
the yes
and I
from
don't
all
know
three.
if it was like conscious or unconscious because you just like what you like and you know what a good photo is, but I don't know that I wasn't specifically thinking about it in that way, if that makes sense.
Well, I think I think I understand your question in a way that, I mean, in a way, yes, we were looking for something that we liked and that we felt. I don't know if I would say that was like my work necessarily, but just for what we were looking at. And what helped free me up to that idea of like judging people and feeling weird about it was, wait, we were asked, they asked us to come and like, and put our stamp on it.
Yeah.
And so that made me feel better about going, okay, like this is what we like and what we don't like then.
Yeah,
It's like, okay.
absolutely. It's
It took us a
reflective on
while
us.
Yeah,
To
but
get warmed
but
up,
we
I
had to
think.
get over that hump of
Yeah.
feeling strange about that. Like, and then you come to the realization like, oh, that's why they asked me here, like to get a certain, they wanted the mix of Drake and Chris and Ed's take on photography for this show.
Absolutely.
Because the Art Center does do a lot of shows where it is like open to the whole, like an open call. And so I think they specifically wanted something that was narrowed down. And so we were just the instruments of narrowing it down with our specific vision in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that answers the question.
And I think that's what made it so fun too. It's because it's like kind of exhilarating because you're submitting your work and then you're notified like it's actually going to be chosen and it's going to be in the show, and that feels great. So
And I will say, like, I don't consider myself an artist, I consider myself a photographer, a professional photographer, because I'm getting paid for paid work. But I never in a million years would ever think to, like, submit to an open call. This changed my mind.
yeah.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm just inspired by all the work and everybody that did submit. And that day was, I drove home, I was like on a cloud 9. I was like,
Yeah, me too.
just like floating from all the inspiration.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
thanks, Chris.
Any more questions before we go down the list?
Let me ask you one, Ed.
Oh, sure.
All right.
What makes a great photograph?
Yeah. I mean, so almost every night I take a book from my book collection and I share images from the books on Instagram on a story. So you go to my stories and there's like 1,000 little dots.
It's the best.
Because I'll share a bunch of photos from a book, and then it's kind of cool because it just goes away in 24 hours, and it's just, it's just, if you saw it, you saw it. And but throughout that process of me doing that, there's always like this one, like out of this book, this one, wow, it's incredible, and I might put a little heart on it or something like this one's insane.
Yeah.
And I've been almost keeping a running tab of like, here's my, if someone were to ask me like, list your like top 20 best photographs, I would kind of go back to these like particular ones that are just incredible. And usually it's a great photograph is when chance was captured. How do you capture chance?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time for photography is just being ready, being present, having your camera set up for the light you're in at any moment, because you never know when something's going to happen. You're going to see something, it's fluid, and the photographers who capture those fleeting moments and just got it, I mean, those to me are the great photographs.
It's the worst when you miss it.
And then, most of the time
I've been
you do
like
miss
haunted by
Yeah.
images I didn't get.
so much haunting.
Yeah, you're like, damn, I missed
For
that.
whatever reason.
Absolutely.
I didn't have a camera, or I just missed the moment in general.
Yep. And that's the thing too. I mean, obviously I'm a little biased with film, but sometimes you lose images too. Sometimes you accidentally open the back of cameras and you forget this is in there, and those photos never make it to see the day of light, and it happens. So you just never know. It takes a lot for the photograph to make it to the world. So.
Yep.
And then you get happy mistakes sometimes.
Oh yeah.
2 years
too.
ago, I was shooting a job for Vogue magazine. They asked me to go to the LA Pride Festival to shoot people kissing.
Oh yeah.
They asked me this because I had done a book called Teenage Kissers, which was just street photos of people kissing. And so they want me to go shoot people at Pride Festival. And then Deanna was my assistant that day, my wife. And she came to me white as a ghost and said I accidentally, because she was changing my roles for me. I had 2 cameras, so I was like, when I got done, I'd be like, change this one, Deanna. And like, we were running around asking people for photos of them kissing, and she came to me and said, like, I opened up the camera on accident before I wound the film. And I was just like, ah! But we took it into the lab anyway.
Yeah.
And even though I was sure it was going to be ruined, we took it in. And the weird light streaks that went through it and the colors and everything ended up being pretty cool, actually. So it was a happy mistake.
Yeah.
Where the photos looked, she was happy that she wasn't in the doghouse.
Yeah. Shout out Deanna.
But yeah, something that happens with analog photography, of course.
Totally.
Cool.
Where were we?
What have you learned in the
What
past?
have you learned from the past 2 years?
I'll say that I learned that you can't force it, if that makes sense. A lot of people, some people, I think you were in two camps during the pandemic. Either you were shooting like you've never shot before because we had all this, everybody had to kind of slow down, or you were just dead in the water. And I had no inspiration. I walked around my neighborhood 500 times, and I'm like, I can't take any more pictures of this palm tree. I've done it already. So I've kind of like learned to, when you're in those ruts, go look to other outlets. Like, okay, go to an art gallery, look at a photo book, watch a photo documentary, but don't beat yourself up when you're in those ruts, because you'll never want to pick up a camera again because you're just so frustrated. So I've kind of learned to, inspiration will ebb and flow, and whatever reason you're going to be in your down, trust that you'll be on the top again. That's what I've learned.
Yeah.
Just to go with the flow, in general.
Go with the flow.
Yeah.
What did you learn over the last 2 years?
You opened a whole business.
Yeah, I've learned a lot in the past 2 years.
Did Relics start over the pandemic?
Yeah, it started in my garage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
Yeah, that bamboo photograph that you see is in my backyard, because like that's like all I saw between all the cameras that I was working on for the store, and then just watching the bamboo grow, because you couldn't really see anyone, couldn't have friends or family over. So
How many people are familiar with what his shop in Long Beach? A lot of you are. I've never been yet, but I just know about it. It's such a cool thing that you basically opened up a photo store in Long Beach in a community that doesn't have that. So you're basically filling a really cool hole for a community that doesn't have a place to go, which is incredible. I mean, as a skateboarder, it's like skate shops were so important to young kids. It's like a place to hang out,
absolutely,
a place to watch videos, a place for the older guys to tell you what's happening. And you're basically creating that scene in Long Beach, which is, I think, really cool. And they started doing developing, doing processing of film now, so people can bring you their film and basically you'll process it.
Absolutely.
Which is incredible.
We just started black and white last week, and so a little bit of everything.
I mean, so I guess you definitely have gone through a serious learning curve over this last.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Especially because a lot of us, camera shops were going away a few years ago. Yeah. And I mean, when I walked into your shop, I was like, no way! Just because it was. Yeah. And I have dreams like that, like finding all these old cameras, like
It's called Relics.
Like as in a film camera is a relic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, that's great. I mean, I think it's amazing what you're doing, and I can't wait to go over there and
absolutely.
What
about you, Ed?
For me, over the last 2 years, I went into. So I first had a guilt at first because I felt like I had been shooting. So before the pandemic, I would come to the downtown every day. Here I live in Huntington Beach, so I would come down and take a walk and shoot photographs almost every day. Just some days just for 1 hour or half an hour, and kind of listed it as my exercise, and would shoot photos. And so I've been building over the last 15 years a huge archive documenting this particular suburb. And then when the pandemic hit, I just completely stopped coming down here. So I had this guilt that I was missing. You know, it's like, here's this moment, this global moment where I should be documenting what's happening in my scene. Like, how am I going to miss this, have this huge hole in my potential project on Huntington Beach where I don't even shoot the pandemic. But, you know, I was kind of like, well, I don't want to get COVID. And I don't want to hang out down here. You know, our sort of particular strain of people in this city didn't seem to care about the pandemic too much. So that was a little concerning for me. And so, yeah, I stopped going. And then, like you said, I just ended up switching gears. I luckily have other things in my life. I do painting and other things. So I sort of just put the camera down and almost didn't really shoot for two full years. But spent that time working on future. It was a way to pause and like look back at the photographs I had shot. So I did a lot of organizing of my archive, a lot of future books. I mean, the Wires Cross book that I'm working on now. I mean, the pandemic was a lifesaver for that because it just took away all the other distractions, and I could just work on this book and paintings. So I was get a lot of paintings done and a lot of book work. So I was working in photography, but physically shooting, I just completely stopped. So yeah, I had guilt and I had weirdness about it.
It's such a interesting. I know that feeling of guilt. Like when I was in my rut, the half of it was beating myself up because I'm like, I should be shooting. Now is the time. Why can't I go do it?
Yeah,
you know.
Absolutely. It's hard. I mean, I was opening up a store and building stuff too, but I'm like, I don't want to shoot. So it's like, well, I'm busy. I'm working, 10, 12 hours a day to get everything set up. And, you feel the pressure. You should be documenting this as a photographer, but one, you're afraid of getting sick, and two, you're busy with other stuff.
Especially if you're like a street photographer. There's no people on the street. So it's like
yeah, and it changes everything. And that's another aspect of the last 2 years that's interesting for me is I feel like the tone has changed out on the streets. It feels a little more dangerous. It feels a little more on edge. People are on edge. I feel weird picking up my camera now towards people more than I did before. I mean, I used to just be hardcore. I'd just shoot like, crazy.
Yeah, a little more hesitation.
Now I feel like a little more hesitant about it.
Yeah.
I think as social media catches up, everyone assumes that you're quote unquote making fun of them if they see you shooting a photo of them. I can't expect them to understand the history of street photography and why I'm doing what I'm doing. To them, I'm just a guy shooting a photo of them, and so they assume immediately that I'm gonna like post it on Instagram and make fun of them or something. And which is so far from what I'm doing, but that's what they assume, and so I feel that edge a little bit more than I did before.
And it looks the same, it looks the same, and people are just a little bit more stressed out, I guess, these days, for sure. Yeah,
it's created a different atmosphere for someone who is in the street photography world, at least. Any questions? Do you guys feel that same vibe out there?
The last 2 years changed the way you look back at your own work back now and see something with a new set of eyes that you just didn't realize it was a good picture before, or if you have feeling that it's more relevant now when you look back?
I think that's a constant truth.
Yeah.
I don't know if the last 2 years changed that in any way, but constantly looking back through my archive, I'm like finding a photo that isn't marked in any way, because I try to do I have a system now where I'll like write like a AA next to it or a AAA or something and I'm like, wait, why doesn't this photo have a AA next to it? And it hits me like I just never considered it before. And it's like such a good thing to go back and look. It's funny because Deanna's always like, my wife's a photographer too. And she's like so worried that someone's going to see work that she thinks is bad that she like put it in a separate box that was called like the crap book. She called
reject pile?
The reject pile. And she was going to throw them away. And I was just like, do not throw those. I begged her not to throw them away because in 10 years, you're going to see that work differently. And she has, of course. Like, I'm right.
Slightly.
Yeah, just a little.
she's used photos in projects from those quote unquote crap books. So yeah, it's always a good idea to keep everything and continually reassess what you have and what you did. You have to trust that what you shot, 10 years ago may be more relevant.
Or even like, even when you think you had a horrible shoot, you're like, no, I hate all of these. I'm like, what? Whatever you're in your head about, get out of your head, like sleep on it, and like go look in the morning. I've had to do that, just like shut it and be like, okay,
some space,
and then you give it like walk away and give it some space, and then realize, okay, there is some winners in here.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because we're our own worst critic always,
Absolutely.
And like people who are in our corner, like our husbands or moms or whatever, wives, significant other, who don't know about photography will be like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm like, but it's lit wrong. How could you think that's a good photo? But the composition's way off. But if you take a step back, maybe not think so technical about it. There's good things a lot of times that you may miss.
Yeah. So we just did our first trip, travel this year, because we haven't traveled over the pandemic. We spent 40 days in Europe because I turned 50 years old over this last July. And and I shot, I think 40 rolls of film.
Okay.
And as I suspected, all of it is crappy. But I know, as you were saying, I know that if I wait, I need to wait and give it some
breathe,
time.
let it live.
I need to come back to it after some distance, But I felt like I would be rusty, and even in the moment, I felt like, oh, I missed this a lot, way more than usual. Like I was a little off my game, and there's some cool photos in there, but not as much as I was expecting.
See, the good thing about you is we talked about on the show. You are good at archiving. So I'm assuming you're archiving even.
It's important it's all archived.
Yeah, because if I don't like if I shoot a roll, I'm like, I hate this, and I'll forget, and then I'm like, where did I put? Where is that? What hard drive is that on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if that's something I can impart to you young photographers out there is
that's important.
Yeah.
Archive. I have go ahead. You have a question?
Speaking of having a lot of photos and doing that, how many of those photos actually get seen?
Ooh.
I mean, probably almost none of it will ever actually see the light of day. Half of it might be just photos of Deanna on a bridge or something, because I'm kind of shooting personal stuff as I shoot street stuff. I might go from like a tourist shot 1 second and then see something and shoot it, and it's on the same roll. So not a lot will probably ever be seen in that case, but it's important to archive it. Back to that point. I know so many photographer friends who have boxes of stuff, and they always swear they know where everything is. I got this box organized, but I mean, my system is like literally every single proof sheet has its own number in a book, in a binder, and that binder has a number. So, I can, and then I have it in low-res files, JPEGs, so I can build a book, for instance, using these low-res files. And when I want to when I get the edit figured out, I just print out what's in the book, and it's literally like book 1, proof 25, and I just know exactly where all my negatives are, because I have so many friends who can't find negatives ever.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, if you might have something, but you don't have it if you can't find it. It's like lost in your house.
Yep.
So you got to know where it is. So I tell young people, start now, because I didn't start early either. I actually had to retroactively do this work. And I mean, I'm lucky that I work from home. I mean, people with a job couldn't do what I did. I mean, I run a skateboard company, so my hours are kind of flexible, and I was able to spend an entire week just slave driving myself to do the work on that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And that's a big
Very
part
important.
of the the process too, is just being organized and archiving too. It's just like, if you can't if you're not archiving, it's just going to make things a little bit difficult for you. You know, and I think it's a big part of the process. But I think some photographers, especially starting out, maybe don't see the importance of it because it's like, it's fine. I can grab it later off the computer or look at a scan. But I know for a fact that I've had a lot of rolls that just went missing, kind of based on like just like you, and I'm like, where is that? I'm like, I think it's here, and or I'll be in my garage, and I'm like, oh, 3 rolls of HP5. Look at that. Wonder what's on this. You know, and you just don't know, and it's nice to just kind of keep everything together. I think it's important, and I think it's important too. It's weird because sometimes you're looking at a roll of film, as soon as you shoot it, you're like, okay, you just got back from the trip, versus something that you find later, you haven't seen it in 3, 4, 5 years. I think that adds a different level on kind of how your eye takes in a photograph too.
Totally.
Where do you think photography will be 20 years from now?
20
That's a good
years.
question.
That's a good one.
That's a hard question and a weird question.
Well, I hope there's still film. It's kind of iffy right now.
That's
Film's
very
gonna-
iffy. Will there be film in 20 years?
Yeah, big question.
It's hard for those of you who don't shoot film. It's kind of hard to come by lately, which is a little concerning.
Very hard.
But I think, I mean, I've talked about this a little bit on my show. Is it for some of us? Is it film that makes us want to shoot, or will we find another, like if it's only digital, or we can only use our phone in the future? Like, is that going to be enough inspiration? Because I started on film, I kind of went my digital when digital was like coming and taking everything over, and everybody like was selling all their film cameras, and everybody thought it was over, and then now it's resurgence. And for me, at least all of my personal work is on film. I don't take a digital camera to do any personal work, and if I travel or my kiddo or anything like that, it's all preferred film. So I struggle because if that's all one day taken away from us for real, I'd have to. I think I would transition into shooting digital because it's photography. That's what it is for me. It's making that photo. And I think that I don't think digital's going anywhere anytime soon. I think that'll always be, now we have the luxury of always having a camera in our pocket.
Yeah.
So we'll always have, it's so accessible now that we can just, hold on, let me take your picture real quick. Look, we're on that panel right now. It's got you right there,
Absolutely.
So I think it's just going to continue to be more accessible. Film photography is a separate thing. That is what it is, but I think we're not going to stop taking photos. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think photography is going to go anywhere in the next 20 years. Film might be hard.
The iPhone itself has changed photography.
Oh yeah.
Especially for someone who is out on the streets taking photos, observational photos of people existing. Existence has changed. I mean, all those photos where someone was reading a newspaper or smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
They don't exist.
That doesn't happen anymore because anyone who has free time on their smoke break is also they might be smoking, but they're also looking at a phone.
Yeah.
So their head is down.
Yep.
And those photos are like shooting fish in a barrel. It's so easy because their attention is not on you walking by shooting a photo anymore. So it really has changed. I find myself walking through the streets and seeing like that would be a cool photo if that person wasn't looking at their phone, and
right.
I end up shooting less because I'm looking for a moment that doesn't involve a phone.
Yeah.
And inevitably you end up getting photos with phones in them, of course, but I try not to. The last 2 photo books I did, I thought I had no phones in any of the photos, but then it turns out I missed one. I saw one after the fact. I was like, "There's a phone in this photo," but and for no reason, just as it was like just kind of fun to try to. I think I like maybe left one photo out purposely because there was a phone in it.
Yeah.
But most of the photos didn't have phones anyway.
Do you think that because with film we see now it's like younger kids are getting into photography because they've never experienced analog, you know? And I wonder if analog were to go away, if that generation would still find photography interesting, or if it is that like, oh, I've never held a photo before, I've never held a roll of film, I've never like put on a record, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like people who find photography find it regardless of the medium.
Yeah.
And then I think people discover the film side of it, and it's like a fetish almost, like, oh, this is a cool thing. Like, you know, we kind of grew up with it as the only thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now it's more of a fetish because people like to hashtag film this or film that or analog this or analog that to kind of like prove the point that I'm shooting this cool thing. But for people who have been around, I mean, like I said, I turned 50, so I feel like an old fogey now. But like I never use those hashtags because it's kind of like that's just like saying.
Yeah, it's just photography to you.
Yeah, it's just what it is.
Do you have any recommendations of how to share your work? Obviously, it's not one of those specific,
Yeah.
and then there's this.
Yeah.
What is another way?
So I've actually gotten back into blogging. That was like a huge thing in like the early 2000s, before Instagram and Twitter and all that. I did a lot because I had a wedding photography business, so it was a way of like sharing client work and stuff. But I always, for me, I want to shoot for a purpose. Like Instagram isn't doing it for me anymore, and going back to that way of sharing work has been really inspiring because now I go and shoot for the blog. You know, I'll shoot something to display it in that way, whether it's like if it's a birthday party or something. Oops, sorry. Like somebody's birthday party, I'll shoot the whole event in like a photojournalistic way because then I'll share it I'll have a place for it, you know. And sometimes that's all you need for inspiration is like a place for it. So I've been sharing work. That way. Whatever makes you shoot, you know. I feel like
I think
we
a
find our
blog
ways.
is a really good way to share work. It's hard because you want to drive people to see your blog, and that's really hard. And the fact that we have Instagram is really cool. But yeah, again, how do you get people there? So something I did when I was younger was I made zines.
Yeah.
Which would be a way to, cheaply make it's like a fun project in itself. You're like, go to Kinko's and share your photos, photocopy it, staple it, and then it would literally just be make 70 and send it to your friends. Or you may have one if you like, and then you show up to an art show or something and give it out to people. That was kind of fun. And then when I started making smaller books, I just started sending them out. I always love this inspirational quote that you might hear, and it's something I tell people all the time. If you don't send a ship out, yours will never come in. And so taking that philosophy, I remember there's a photographer I love named Jim Goldberg. Great photographer. He's a Magnum. I mean, he's like, really big guy. And he was based in San Francisco. And through the course of conversation with a friend who lived in San Francisco, he said, "Oh, I know Jim Goldberg." And I was like, "Oh, do you know where he lives? Give me his address, please." So like a stalker. But I got this guy's address, and I just sent him a book. It was like that whole thing, like just send a ship out. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yep.
I left a little note saying, "Hey, I'm a big fan. Here's my new book I just made." He calls me, says, "Hey, this is Jim Goldberg. Like, I teach photography at this school in Oakland, and I would love for you to come talk at my class."
Whoa.
So it just went from like one little piece of information I got, and then I sent the book out, and then next thing you know, I'm like literally hanging out with this photographer who I think is great, and I'm speaking at his class. And now I've met people from that class who said, "Oh, I was in Jim Goldberg's class when you were speaking." Like that was a fun day when you guys were there. So it gave me the chance to participate, to be there, to go to this guy's class and talk. But so I don't recommend being a stalker, but but that's the kind of thing, sharing your work is, it's a line between like being too aggressive, which is off-putting, and just doing it. So a lot of it is just doing it. If you're doing it and then people see you, they kind of feel the authenticity, like, oh, this person's doing this regardless if they're getting fame or not. They're just doing it. And that's what is really attractive in a way, when I discover someone who I just see doing cool stuff. And so I guess the key is just to keep doing cool stuff. There's another fun saying. It's like, it goes, I always mess up the order of it. It's about success. How does it go? There's no success with hard work, although, I forget how it goes. This sucks. Essentially,
Yeah.
well, I mean, the point of it is that you have to work hard regardless if success comes or not. Like success takes hard work, but there's no success without hard work, even though you may not get it. I'm butchering it, but you know what I mean. The point is that you have to just keep working and work hard regardless of what happens. So it's like keep your nose to the grindstone.
And there's also like cheap ways to make a photo book if you've never done it before. There's like a lot of online, like Blurb is the one that comes to mind, where you can just upload your photos and
Yeah, Blurb's good.
they'll make a really nice photo book for like $10, you know. And if you even if you just want to make one for yourself to hold your work, you know, I think that's really important. And whether if you the intention is to make 100 and sell them, or 2 or 3 for your immediate family, having that tangible work will inspire you to shoot. I guess, yeah.
So yeah, make a zine.
Make some prints, put them in a frame.
I mean, that's kind of part of the culture I come from in skateboarding. Everything was kind of a do-it-yourself thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was no one is going to give you a concert. No one's going to give you an art show. No one's going to give you a photo book. You have to just do it yourself. That was the whole ethos of making a zine, would just be like, we're just going to do it ourselves. We make our own magazine. And the same thing went for art shows. If no one's giving you an art show, or organize an art show. I mean, you could walk into this art center right now and talk to Kate, the director, who's a super nice lady, and propose an idea for an exhibition. They're probably, I mean, it might not work, but it might. It's something where you try to do it.
I've also done the whole coffee shop thing.
Yeah, and it was a thing.
Go into a coffee shop and be like, I would like to hang some work here. What do you think?
Yeah.
And they said yes. And it was up for a month.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff works. It's just, sending those ships out. A lot of our early skate tours were, a guy would just rent a warehouse, and this was just a guy in a small town in the Midwest who would just be like, I'm going to organize something. And they would rent a warehouse, have a band play, call up Toy Machine and say, hey, will you guys come here on your tour? And suddenly we're at this crazy event in Texas where it's like Toy Machine is skating a makeshift skate park, and there's a band playing, and it all just came from one guy just doing it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of ways to just kind of subvert the system and do your things yourselves. And a lot of times when you do those cool things yourself, the tastemakers, the gatekeepers, etc., will see that and think, this is like, what's happening here? So, like, you created your own scene suddenly, and then you kind of get opportunities to go into the mainstream, so to say, scene that you might really want to be going towards. So it's hard. There's not a great question to how do you get your work out there and share it, but those are some ways that I think are pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's just getting it out there, reaching out to people, sending them an email, just trying to figure out what's a good place for your work to be. Maybe it's a small show, maybe it's, just sending someone prints, anything like that. Websites are good. YouTube, a lot of people put stuff on YouTube as well, videos, which I think if you do it right can kind of help you get a little bit more lift on it for photographs. Because I think there's an audience out there. I mean, Tumblr. I think Tumblr's coming back as well.
Is it really?
Yeah,
oh,
for
cool.
sure. Noticed some really cool stuff on there as well, so that's probably worth checking out.
It was Flickr, too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think people are looking for something different, and I don't think there's really like a blueprint. I don't think there's like a certain way that you should like try to like get it out there. Just try, just keep testing, try to experiment here and there, and I think you'll eventually hit something. But I think if you don't try a few different channels, I don't think you'll probably get the results you're looking for.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to answer the question, what do you consider your greatest achievement? That sounds really weird. And then it says plug current and upcoming projects, which I don't know if anyone really cares about either.
Yeah.
That's not true.
What's your
I mean, the
upcoming
only thing
project?
I really have is my podcast. That's what I have to plug. I host a film photography podcast called Analog Talk with my co-host Timothy, and we try to put an episode out every Wednesday wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, Google, I think.
I've listened to a bunch, and it's really interesting to hear different photographers talk and how their methods are, and I found it pretty interesting.
But as far as my greatest achievement, I'll say this has been, I was telling Kate and Kathleen, this has really been a career highlight, just being a part of this show and seeing all the incredible work and making it kind of our own.
Yeah.
And then seeing everybody on Friday was it kind of reminded me of like what I said in the beginning, like being around like-minded people. It's honestly what like motivates me, makes me want to keep shooting, and I was, like I said, I drove home on cloud 9 because it was just so wonderful. So
Yeah. That's nice.
That's great.
Yeah, for me, it was wanting to just take part in my community. I live here, and I've done a show here at the Art Center one time, and when they asked me to be part of the jury, I just thought, what a cool way to like sort of put my money where my mouth is kind of thing, and just take part in this and kind of show up for the community and do something that's right in my backyard. So yeah, it's been a fun experience for me, especially talking with you guys and going over the jury selection was really good because I hadn't been in a good photo discussion in a long time. So it's kind of like I felt rusty talking about photos even. And to be there, sitting there and discussing other people's work was just kind of cool to get back in the groove.
And we've been working on it for a couple months too. It's been a work in progress. So to see it all come together was like the most rewarding.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
All the different worries we had at first, like, are we gonna fill the space enough? Like,
yeah. Are people gonna like it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Should we put
what
this
if nobody
here?
comes?
Yeah.
What if nobody comes. Do you have upcoming projects, Drake?
Let's see. Upcoming projects. I've been working on a book for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll see if I can get that actually coming to fruition. I used to live in San Francisco. I used to work in tech, and I used to photograph every day on my hour lunch break that I had, and I would just shoot black and white film all the time. So I have just like hundreds of rolls that I haven't even really processed yet and developed. And it's pre-pandemic as well, and a lot of my friends that still live there, they just let me know it's not the same, especially on the streets. Not a lot of people. All the different workers are all working from home, so it's just a lot different now. But yeah, I would just shoot.
Town.
Yeah, I would shoot it every day on my lunch break, and just to get a break from working the corporate jobs. And I'm like, I hate this, but I like photography, so hopefully I can get some of that work out there and let it see the world, because it's just I don't know what's on some of those rolls, but shooting like one thing just over and over and over for years, it should be interesting to see what's on there. So that's a upcoming, long coming project. So we'll see. I think that's it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll go ahead.
Having shot a lot of street photography, like what's the most awkward encounter you had with someone?
Ooh, this is a good question.
Jeez.
I've had surprisingly I've had not that many weird, like, I don't know. I've had some weird interactions. I've had friends who have had really bad ones where they've been chased and like assaulted over photography. I haven't had that. But I, like I said, I shoot photos of people kissing sometimes. I think I shot someone who may have been kissing someone that they didn't want photographed.
Ooh, scandal.
And they were kind of angry at me.
Yeah, right?
No, there's no money in photography. There's no money in books either. I mean,
Yeah, keep your mouth shut.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Keep your photo.
I could have used it as
yourself.
blackmail for sure.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I have one story I tell sometimes where it's about just the context, being me misunderstanding the context in the moment, but then using the photograph afterwards to tell a story about my mistake. So I was in Paris, and we're at the famous church Sacre-Cœur on top of the hill there, and I'm shooting photos, and everyone's around and milling about, and then some child was having a temper tantrum, spazzing out on the ground and like banging his fist and crying and stuff. And I was like, here's kind of a funny photo. He refused to move. He like laid down on the ground. And I'm like, here's a moment, like a parent dealing with like a child going, it's a universal moment. So I like shot a photo of this kid sitting there. Then as I like looked around a little bit, I realized like, oh, this is a special needs class.
Oh.
And then instantly I go into this mode of like, who saw me?
Yeah.
Like, everyone must think this guy's a monster shooting a photo of like a mentally challenged kid. What a lame person. And I felt terrible. I'm like, oh no, like this isn't what I was shooting. Like I thought it was something else.
Yeah.
And but then I get home and the photo is like kind of interesting. It's like you can't tell what it is. It's just these cobblestones and this kid sort of sitting there with tears and a look on his face. And so I decided to now print that photo and write the story of me shooting it and the context of it, like placing the photo in context of how I felt. And that I feel like has been kind of a good lesson. I had a similar one where, so I'll walk down the street and I'll see something maybe 20 feet ahead of me and I'll be ready for it. I'll see, so someone's sitting on a bench and I was walking by and this was in Copenhagen, I think. And there's these two women sitting on a bench, and I thought they looked pretty cool from a distance. And I plan to walk by and shoot a photograph of them sitting on the bench. As I'm setting my camera up, and then as I get there, I like do the turn and shoot. And in the exact moment I'm turning and shooting, I realized that the woman was a burn victim. So her skin is completely melted. And she looks right into my camera, right in my face. And immediately I go, again, she must think like, what an asshole,
right?
Like that he's shooting me because I'm burned,
right?
And thinks it's funny or whatever,
right.
But that wasn't my intention at all, And that photo I've never used. I don't even think it came out, but just the feeling like the whole day was, I put my camera, and I was just like, let's go home. I feel like the worst person in the world because it was just like, just a miscue in the streets. I didn't realize until I got 2 feet away from this person that it's something I wouldn't have shot normally.
That's interesting.
And it put me in this moral conundrum going, for the next couple of days I felt really weird.
Yeah.
And it made me maybe more careful, about what I shoot. But mostly I guess I'm worried about the perception of it, It's like I felt more bad that she didn't understand.
Right.
And like the idea of going back and trying to explain it would even be worse.
Right.
Oh, I didn't want to it's just walk away and chalk it up to like you're a loser for the day. But those are two experiences I've had where that have been kind of strange. Is that what you were meaning? Do you guys have any weird?
I don't shoot street enough to have any crazy stories. I'm still practicing that, so.
Yeah. Another one here in Huntington Beach was there was a policeman was arresting two people who were drinking on the beach. You can't have open containers on the beach. It was during one of these events, like a summertime event. So, it's kind of like an interesting photo. There's a cop taking this couple off the beach. And I shot some photos of it, and the policeman decided, like, this guy, I'm just going to crucify this guy.
You?
Yeah.
Ooh.
So he starts yelling at me, calling me a pervert because the girl was in a bikini. But it's both, it was a guy and a girl both getting arrested. And he just starts yelling, like, "You're a pervert. What are you doing shooting this photo?" This is the policeman doing this, you know? And I got in this argument with him, you know, trying to say, like, you don't realize that, like, that this is a newsworthy or, like, interesting event that you're taking these people off the beach in zip ties, you know? It's like...
Oh, geez.
Like,
just for having a good time.
But he was just like, he is just not having it. And I understand. It's like, obviously, there's tons of just...
Yeah.
You know, belligerent people, and I just became one extra person messing with him that day. And so I just had to, like, get raked over the coals. Ultimately, he didn't do anything about it, but
Wow.
it was really embarrassing to have him screaming at me, a policeman on the beach calling me a pervert and
Jeez.
stuff like that. But that's like the risk you take shooting at the beach here, obviously, because you have a question, Dee? Which one? Ah.
I blocked it out.
Did you black it
I
out?
forgot about that one.
It's a little trauma there.
May I indulge it? I feel like I'm just telling like a bunch of war stories. But so in Spain, we're at the top of the hill in Spain, Mount Tibidabo, and I'm there with a bunch of skateboarders. So we kind of like went up there. It was a rainy day, so we had to kind of just pass the time. So we went up to visit this church at the top of a hill, and we park our car, and it's kind of woodsy. And I lose Deanna. I don't know where Deanna is. So I start kind of yelling like, "Deanna, Deanna, where are you?" And this guy comes out of the woods.
Oh,
Out of the woods?
Out of the woods.
jeez.
In Spanish, so there's a language barrier. And he's like, I think he's mad at me because I'm yelling.
Uh-huh.
You know, he's really mad. And I'm kind of like, oh, well, I don't care about you. I'm like looking for my wife. But he started like, you know, kind of confronting me like, and I'm just like going, Deanna. And then he whips out this knife, this big knife. He's an older man. And he's like, has this knife.
Okay.
So I'm not very scared at
Yeah.
this point, you know? It's more just like, he like whips out the knife. And at that point, I'm like, well, this is a cool photo. So I shot a photo because the guy's kind of sitting there with his knife pointing it at me. And then he like really flipped out when I shot the photo of him, and he started running at me. But I was able to like easily like dance around him because he had a stick too, like a sharpened stick and a knife.
Jeez.
And those photos I have used in a book before. So that was funny. I thought you were gonna. There's another story from Spain I forgot about. I did get a roll of film taken away by a policeman in Spain.
Oh.
We were walking down a big tourist street, and we just happened by the police arresting a guy, and the guy would not get in the car. You know how like the cops always like grab your head so you don't hit your head? He was just like keeping stiff,
Oh,
and he
boy.
wouldn't let him in. So the cop starts banging his head on the door, and I was right there, so I shot a couple photos, and then one of the other cops saw me and was just like, well, you can't have that, and they
Of
just
course
forced
not.
me to like open my camera right there and take the film out.
Unbelievable.
And I was like super bummed, but also I felt like I just put the roll in, I think, so I wasn't that angry about it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I had lost anything really. And then my friend who was filming it with a Super 8 camera, and they had never seen that before. So when he opened his up, he's just like, what? And they didn't understand that you take the cartridge out, so
yeah.
he got to keep his footage of that.
Oh, that's awesome.
So there's a
that's
bunch of
funny.
war stories from street
Yeah.
photography for you guys.
That's awesome.
Anybody else have any questions before we wrap up?
Do you guys have war stories?
Yeah, what are your guys' stories?
Yeah,
You must have some war stories.
it has to be more.
I don't know. For me, upcoming project is, so like I said at the beginning of this, I started shooting photos because of skateboarding. I wanted to document the skateboarders I was surrounded by. And that body of work is finally coming out this next year in book form. And so it's really a lifelong project for me, starting like the very reason I started. This is what this book is.
Oh, cool.
And it's kind of answering the question, what is it like being a pro skateboarder as seen from the inside? As a pro skateboarder myself, I was shooting my comrades and just documenting the shenanigans, like all the I don't know what the word is for it, like, a bunch of guys. There's a lot of toxic masculinity in it. And we've tried to put this in context for modern day, which has been interesting because a lot of the characters in the book are legendary skateboarders in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the guys in the book was in the closet the whole time I was shooting.
Wow.
And famously came out years later. And so there's an interview with him in the book discussing the fact that he was in the closet during our time together when I was documenting him as a pro skateboarder. We had the first female pro street skater on our team, and she was in the car with all these guys, this toxic mix of young men.
Yeah.
And so there's also an interview with her, talking about her experiences from that time. So it's been really fun to take these photographs, this documentary project, and then put it in context for now. And so there's like diary entries and maps and all sorts. It's a big project. And it's going to come to Long Beach, actually. Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know if I've really revealed this yet, but it's going to be a museum show in Holland in 2023, but it's slated to come to the Long Beach Museum of Art in 2024. So summer 2024, this exhibition I'm talking about will be here locally for everyone to come see. Hopefully you guys will.
That's amazing. I'll come.
Yeah, I'll be there.
When's the
Thanks.
book? Same time?
The book comes out March 2023.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yay.
So Aperture's putting it out, and so that's my main project.
Nice. Cool.
Awesome.
You
That's
guys
awesome.
actually pulled me from, I was like working on prints, getting everything ready for the framer before the bell rang to come over here.
Take a little break and
Yeah, take a little
See
break
some
and go
art,
talk
talk-
photography.
Yeah, nice.
well, thank you everybody for coming and
Yeah.
hanging out with us.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
I
thank
think-
you.
I
Thank
think we're
you.
done, yeah? Oh, no,
Yeah.
we're half an hour early.
Yeah, we got a little more time. Q&A?
But obviously, if there's any questions, we're more than open to discuss anything.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yes?
How often are you guys in photographs? Do you always people and what are the thinking that this looks back when you said that you're looking for different times?
So I'll say I'm being very conscious of it now because I have a 7-month-old, and even I'm shooting a lot of like video with my phone, and I'm like the ominous voice, I'm just like, hi boo boo, like, and you never see me. So I think that's I have two pieces hung over here where I'm like using other, because you can ask your partner, take a picture, but it's in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I've looked towards like reflections. So I'm having fun like documenting him and I like in a mirror. So I'm very conscious of not being, but I'm also having fun making sure that I am, if that makes sense. What about you guys?
Yeah, I agree. I also have a new baby, 3 months.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing of just trying to capture as many photos as possible with both of us together. Yeah, other than that, I'm usually behind the camera, and I hate my photo to be taken. I don't know. It's something I just cringe over. It just feels so uncomfortable.
We should do it now because you're going to look back
Absolutely.
with, baby girl and be upset that you didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been pushing me a lot just to get out there and just get as many photographs taken. I'm just like, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So, because I know it'll age over time. So,
Yeah, it's a time capsule.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I think it's funny how a lot of people who are behind the camera don't like being in front of the camera. I'm also a bad subject.
yeah.
I just know the camera's there and I get kind of stiff
Uh-huh.
and get a little weird, so I'm not a great subject. A lot of the people I shot for this project I was talking about were so great at ignoring the camera. Like when I pull the camera out, they just acted like it wasn't there.
That's the best.
And it's so cool. It's like they're such a pleasure to shoot people like that.
Mhm.
And I'm not that person. I know it's there and I just instantly start worrying about a good side or something.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what it is, but you just know it's there. So I'm not often the subject of photographs, aside from like the fact that I was a pro skateboarder. So I, inevitably had to have my photo shot as like while skateboarding, and portraits and stuff for skateboard magazines. And then of course Deanna shoots. She's a photographer, so she shoots photos of me that are I don't know, interesting. We shoot each other a lot, so yeah, there's maybe a project down the line.
Oh yeah, you should. The book should be from your guys's. Her book should be of you and your.
Yeah, possibly.
That'd be cool.
Well, we both shot so much in Huntington Beach that we thought it'd be cool to do
Oh
a
yeah,
book together.
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
That
cool.
would be her, because oftentimes we're shooting at the same time
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So it'd be really interesting to see her take and my take of a lot of times the same exact subject happening, how her camera captures it, her eye and sensibility compared to my sensibility.
Yeah.
And so we thought that could be a fun project in the future to do a book about Huntington Beach that has each of our perspectives. And then the book about our own relationship, I have a title for it already, Suburban Domestic Monogamy. But that probably won't come out until I'm 80.
There you go.
You got some time.
long
Yeah, like
project.
30 years before that one comes out.
Any other questions? Yeah. You have a whole process. Okay.
You guys can do the focal length first, and then I'll
Um,
bloviate about books.
I like 35.
Yeah.
I think 35 millimeters is a sweet spot for me.
Me too. 35.
I'm more of a 50 millimeter person. I have a
I-
50 on here right now, and I usually have a 50 on.
Even this little guy's got
I remember
35.
talking to Glenn E. Friedman, who's a pretty known photographer who shot a bunch of skateboarders and music acts over the years. And I told him I shoot a 50, and he's just like, 50, that's like a zoom lens.
Yeah.
Because he shoots like a 28. He
Yeah.
shoots really wide for like music and skateboard shots.
Yeah.
Or a fisheye kind of thing. And so to him, 50 was a zoom. And I see it. You
Yeah.
know, after looking at a 28,
Yeah.
going to a 50 feels really claustrophobic. But I like cutting out all the background noise myself.
Yeah. I can see that.
35 is like the perfect in between.
Yeah.
I feel like between the 28 and
I would say 35 is the standard for most people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
I
general.
like 35.
Most photography books I have are probably 35 millimeter.
Yeah.
So editing or like choosing for a book, it's always sort of a hard thing because, you know, for this, let's just take the one I just did, like the Wires Cross book. I had to go through every single photo I've ever shot to determine which photo would possibly be in this project. And that number was, I think, 5,000 something.
Jeez.
Was like, this is potentially like this falls into this category about skateboard culture, et cetera. Like these are, you know, so I did that process going through all that. So I had 5,000, let's say.
That's insane.
And for me, since I have all these as little JPEGs that I scan off the proof sheet, they're real bad. What I did is I went through a process of having it. So my first project was take this 5,000 and cut it into 2,500. And so I did that, and then I halved it again. And this took months where I would just go through and sort of half it. And then, okay, I need to make 1,000. I need to make 500. And I think around like, ideally I was trying to hit like 300. What 300 photos will tell the story that I'm trying to tell and fit into a book form, you know, because you have to like make the project manageable. It's like I could have easily made like a 500-page book. And even having said that, the book is 300 pages, so
Wow.
it's kind of a thick book.
Yeah.
But that's how I went towards condensing it. And then once you get that number, then there's a lot of give and take, because I consider some images to be tentpole images that hold up, you know, like a skeleton of the project. And then there's photos that end up being support images. Like this photo is not necessarily great on its own, but in the context of these other photos that are holding it up, it's an important photo to show because it kind of tells a story or documents an aspect that I didn't have that piece to share, to tell that story, you know what I mean? So once that 300 came, some of those 300 went out, and then some other ones that weren't in the original cut ended up coming back in. And so that's the process in a nutshell, I guess, is like but it's hard to like come up with that. A lot of times a publisher will have a say. That's another thing with working with publishers is that a lot of them aren't in the business to just push the button and publish your book for you. They got into it because they are interested in photography, and so they want to see what you're working on at an early stage and kind of give their input into like what it should be, which I found sort of hard because this book I'm working on is with Aperture, and they're kind of a big publisher, and they put me through a ringer that I wasn't prepared for. In retrospect, a lot of the stuff the girl told me, the woman I'm working with, Leslie Martin, I was really resistant to at first because I'm so used to doing everything myself. But in retrospect, everything she said made it better. She was good at refining it and seeing the project for what it was. And like, you know, at one point she said, we need to lose 16 pages.
Yeah.
And I had a heart attack. Like,
Right.
But then once I did it, I was like, wow, she's right. Like, it's better without these. Like, I took 16 pages out that I thought were so precious, and then suddenly the book's more streamlined and better. So, you know, yeah, it's a process for sure. And then a lot of times the theme sort of helps dictate it too. Some of the books I've done have been typologies, essentially. I did a book called Teenage Kissers, which is very self-explanatory. Teenage Kisser and Teenage Smokers. I've done 2 books like that, which are very self-explanatory. And I've done some zines that are super typology. Like I did one called Umbrella, which is just photos of people with umbrellas. So it was really easy to edit that down. But then I did another project called Wayward Cognitions. And as the title might suggest, it's kind of like a stray thought. And for me, the question was, how do I make a photo book without a theme? The theme is photography, basically. And the themes that I shoot generally would come out through the book, but there was no theme. And it's hard to do that because most people want a theme. It's hard to sell a book that's just, this is about photography. People want a story and like, what's this about? What's the time frame? What is it a place? You know, is this about this place or that place or this person? It's hard to just say these photos are from all over the place in time, in theme, in subject matter. But I'm trying to weave a story together using photos for the people who are like-minded, I guess. And I had a feeling there was people out there who like looking at photography and wanted to piece together a story without being told exactly what it's about.
Yeah.
And so that's one way to do it too.
Yeah.
The other way, a lot of people do, when I did my one photo book, making 4x6 prints and like really having like a tangible way to like display them helped a lot too. I had them like posted up on my apartment wall, and I was like moving stuff around. Sometimes it's
essential.
Yeah.
Better
to be able to look at it versus like trying to do it on a computer and look at it on a display.
Yeah. I left that part out.
Yeah.
when I did those that halving and halving, when I got to the 300, I printed them out too.
Yeah.
And I moved all my furniture out of my whole living room and laid them on the floor.
Yep.
And that's part of sequencing. And yeah, it's a big process, but you need that. You have to have the physical prints in your hand at some point, even if it's just a printout, just to see and feel what it looks like in a physical form. Yeah, you can only go so far on the computer.
Totally.
That's so true.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, for me, it's always just kind of like a yes, no, maybe pile, and then kind of letting that kind of grow within itself. And then I like sticky notes and like yellow sticky note, green, red, and that way kind of seeing something visual and then printing them out, lay them down, hanging them on the wall, seeing how they all feel, see if they work together.
Yep.
Removing what doesn't. Yeah.
Good question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question.
And the sequencing is interesting too, because so for this book I was making spreads, and each spread was relating to the photo across from it. But then once I printed it out, like she was saying, and started looking at it, everything changes. I realized that these spreads can't be on the page next to each other, so I started moving things around.
Yep.
And then when you do that, it changes another thing. It's like a weird Jenga puzzle, because once I moved a spread to a different spot, then it didn't go with another photo, and that. So you end up doing. So I had this cork board. I started printing them smaller, so I didn't have to move all my furniture out of the way. And I was able to fit the whole thing on a cork board. And in that case, I was able to like take a spread out, cut it in half,
Oh, wow.
mix and match
Cool.
some spreads.
Nice.
And, but I was running back and forth because my cork board's not in the same room as my computer. So I was like running to the computer to change what I just did on the board, and vice versa. If I change something on the computer, I got to print it out and then put it back up on the cork board. But, it's a fun process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh.
This happens a lot. So I just did a book of my drawings, and practicality got in the way because the publisher wanted to print in China. China has a strict censorship law,
Oh.
and so some of the drawings that might have had a penis on it had to be out of the book. So I had to take out 2 or 3 drawings from the book, or even just like a female nudity, anything like that, like any genitals essentially was out. And so three of the drawings had to come out. And I went through that whole process in my head of like, well, are we taking, am I taking the teeth out of this book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I just went with like, it doesn't matter that much. Like,
Right.
I don't think it's a make or break image. And then for this book too, there's images that I lost because out of, I guess, politeness and kindness for friends and stuff.
Yeah.
I have a photo that I shot of a guy, and he's nude in the photo. But in the intervening years, from when I shot the photo in the mid '90s till now, he's become a youth pastor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I felt like, okay, this guy's not going to want this photo out in the world. And so that photo had to come out. And there's a couple photos like that in the book. But then luckily, a lot of the people I still am in good contact with. So I was able to share it with them. There's like, I have there's some cocaine in a photo.
Yeah.
And at least this guy knows that it's going to be in there, and he's cool with it. Like, that this particular person sees it as like, oh, that's my life was
Right.
back then. I've changed now, but I'm not embarrassed of the past,
Yeah.
so. And
That's
he's
cool.
like, I like photography and I understand what you're doing. So, as a document of my youth, it's kind of a cool thing. So he wasn't angry about it, but other people kind of, it would probably be weird. So, but I didn't have anything where the publisher said this has to come out. In
good.
fact, we changed publishing locations because of that for this book, because
Nice.
they wanted to do China too, because it's the cheapest place to publish books.
Yeah.
But we had to switch to Singapore, which will cost them a lot more to make the book now, because I wouldn't budge on a couple photos.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was surprised you budged at all.
Well, I've had 2 books now where we changed locations because of that. My book, Deformer,
Yeah.
was also was going to be a Rizzoli book at one point.
Wow.
And their legal department, they're a huge company, so they could easily get sued. And I had to go page by page with their lawyer on a phone call. Like page 25, top image, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Is this in public, or can you be sued for it, kind of thing. And it boiled down to 3 images. One was some kids smoking a cigarette
Yeah.
here in Huntington Beach. And they just thought like, oh, well, this is like, since these kids are minors and this doesn't feel that public, even though it was like a public park, they were worried about it. And they said, you got to pull this image. And luckily, I got saved by the bell. A friend of mine said, like, I have a different publisher for your book if you want. And so I was able to just say, like, screw you guys, I'm going to do it over
Wow.
here. And the Italian publisher didn't care about anything. They didn't worry about
Yeah.
getting sued, I guess. So
Nice.
yeah.
Interesting. It's like, don't you know that's art? It's like,
Yeah. Can't censor my
Can't censor.
photographs.
That's what I mean by
Yeah.
practicality. Practicality comes into it. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like always a mix of like
Mhm.
cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, a lot of times the images aren't a deal breaker because I have so many images that I'm like, nothing's ever a make or break prospect. But in some cases, like if it was this photo really encapsulates the whole narrative of the story, in that case you have to fight for it.
Yeah.
And make sure it goes in.
Yeah.
Because something, if you did take it out, then you know it's out, and then you're just going to feel some type of way about
Yeah.
the book forever.
Absolutely.
You know, you're like, it feels incomplete now because that one image isn't in there and nobody's going to get to see it.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I don't know, that's everything. I mean, in a smaller scale, a book is like making a movie. It's not just one person. There's a publisher,
Yep.
and there's costs, and there's all sorts of other potential things in there. So it's kind of a collective project, and a lot of times.
Yeah.
Unless you self-publish, then you can do whatever you want.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But you might not get that cool distribution and promotion built into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, last call. Well,
Any questions?
again, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Really,
Thanks
thank
for
you,
coming.
thank you.
Thank you.
It's been an honor.